Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows, Season 4, Episode 7, The Pine Barrens. In this episode, everybody splits off to have guys' time and girls' time, and each of them goes wrong in their own very particular ways. Plus, we get to meet Guillermo's family, and this whole thing is the best. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. Max, how are you doing there, bud? I haven't seen you in a while. I know that you are not able to attend a lot of these, but just want you to know that I miss you, and I hope you are well, and that you are enjoying the coverage. So, the Pine Barrens, I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I imagine I'm not. The first thing I think of when I think about the New Jersey Pine Barrens is that episode of The Sopranos. And so I went into this like really wondering what we were getting, because the Sopranos episode, for those who aren't aware, is like one of the standout episodes of that show due to the Sopranos dealt in like really dark comedy a lot of the time anyway, but that particular episode is really funny. And it's the dudes are basically like lost, and I think they run out of gas or something, and they haven't got anything to eat, and they're freezing, and they wind up like subsisting on packets of ketchup that one of them finds in the like glove compartment of the car. So I always think about the Pine Barrens as being like this inhospitable, especially wintry sort of place that you don't want to go and wind up like abandoned there. So it doesn't sound for me like the kind of place that's ideal for a little vacation jaunt, even though I understand as a vacation jaunt, it's going to be a very different situation. It just sounds like unpleasant to me. But what we're doing here is we're going on a trip with Shawn, their human friend, and he has like a cabin that's been in his family, it seems, for like a couple of generations. Laszlo is explaining the New Jersey woodlands is where it is, and then Nandor interrupts and says the Pine Barrens, and Laszlo's very irritated and says it's the same fucking thing. And he then says, for a weekend hunting trip, and Nandor says, we vampires do not hunt. And Laszlo says, of course we fucking do. We we hunt humans. So right off the bat, we're getting the two of them kind of at each other's throats a little bit, so to speak. Vampires at each other's throats. LOL. But they are just, I mean, the two of them have always kind of butted heads and had very different views on certain things, you know, which is fine. I mean, you can be friends with somebody and not agree with them on everything. But I'm kind of glad to see an episode where we're sort of dealing with that, and also like getting to see them really talk about their friendship and what it means. We wind up in a place eventually where Nandor is like upset that Laszlo is calling Shawn his best friend. And I found that surprising. I didn't expect Nandor to be upset by it. I don't think it ever occurred to me that Nandor would expect Laszlo to call him his best friend, because the two of them don't seem like friends to me. They seem like roommates who get along for the most part. But I wouldn't like call them best friends. It just seems like they have never really quit one another. And that's, unfortunately, I guess there's like a lot of friendships out there like that. This is something that I haven't had to deal with, but that's not exactly bragging or anything. It's more me learning in the past like 10 years how to not be a really lazy friend, because friendships take maintenance. And that's not to say that you can't go for a time without talking to somebody and see each other again and it be great and you're 100% friends still. Of course that can happen. Like, a lot of people have that with different folks in their lives. But more that if you want to like call somebody a friend that you can rely on, you can't just take. You've got to be there for them a lot too. And I think that I really didn't understand for a while in my life how to be there for friends. And I'm still really learning, because I can be a little bit too sort of like intellectual about what it means to be there for your friends. And for example, my friend Cam, who was one of my bridesmaids and also a co-host on some of the other Unspoiled shows, she is going through a lot of stuff, and I have really like had to tell myself that reaching out for the sake of it is still worthwhile. I have always felt as if reaching out without having anything material to offer in the way of support. And by that I mean something as practical as money or information, or something as simple as like, I have time to hang out later this week, let's make a date. If I can't do either one of those things, then reaching out isn't really worth anything. And that's not it at all. Like, I don't expect to only hear from my friends when they have something they can give me, or when they can like sit down and get on camera with me for an hour. That's not what I want out of my friendships at all. But I hold myself to this like weird, it's not even a standard. It just feels like I view things in a sort of transactional way sometimes. And sometimes your friend who's going through some shit just wants a text from you letting them know, I'm really sorry. This sucks. If you need to vent or talk, you know, and sometimes that's really all it's about. But because it's taken me a while to learn that, I have failed to reach out to folks over time and wound up like losing some friendships, because the only times I ever did reach out were when I wanted them to listen to me vent, or when I was looking for their help or their sympathy on something. And it's a really like ugly thing to realize about yourself, that you were the taking kind of friend. But I really, really was. And I am so aware of that now, you know. So anyway, all this to say that I have like a certain idea sometimes about friendships because of what I have experienced. But I know that there are a lot of folks out there who have friendships that are genuinely just, well, neither of us like broke it off. So technically, we're still friends, we still see each other, and we're in one another's lives, but really, we don't like each other that much. And that is like a shockingly common thing, especially as people get to a certain age and really begin to like grow up and change as people and their priorities shift. It will become more and more apparent if you guys had like real differences to begin with. It will grow more dramatic and exaggerated. And I always, because it has taken like so much for me to really understand how to be a good friend, when I see folks that are just friends because nobody has bothered to break the friendship off, I'm always surprised, because I would have just let it die. I would have just stopped, you know what I mean? Like, because of the fact that I was fine with letting friendships die for so long, continuing to maintain one simply because, well, you know, I don't really like him, but I asked him if he wanted to get together for coffee because I had nobody else to go with. Go alone then. What? Why would you do that to yourself? What do you mean? So that's, anyway, what I think about, like, Nandor and Laszlo is that there's just been a vibe for me of the two of them happen to be in this living situation that is working out for them and has been for a while. The house that they are in has plenty of room, and they each live in such a way that it doesn't interfere with one another's ways of living. And so they are in each other's lives. But I have never really seen them as friends exactly. And to find out that they did kind of like have something that felt a little bit more distinct and has begun to fizzle over time actually makes a lot of sense. So anyway, I'm sorry guys, going off about friendship, but friendship, I do find it really interesting. Friendship is it's the kind of like word that is a real catch-all. And as somebody I've been reading some Jane Austen again lately. Like, I go through a period where I want something that's sort of comforting. So I'll go back to Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility. And I have been interested in how often people will like be like, oh, we're such good friends in those stories. And really it's the frenemy thing. We're friends because we travel in the same circles, and so we are inevitably going to see each other, and we are going to make the best of it, but we don't like each other, and a lot of what we say is sort of like backhanded and and cutting, or else like hinting at something vis-a-vis my feelings of superiority to you. And that's another one. Frenemies is a thing I just don't get. Why bother? But I guess if you just know you're going to have to see somebody because they live somewhere that you travel to, or they're, mutuals with somebody that you see a lot, I suppose. This scene too, when they're driving up, I could not stop laughing. There is a moment because they've got Colin Robinson with them, and he's playing, I think, on an iPad in between the two of them, very, very focused. And Shawn says, "What are you playing back there?" And as soon as he says this, both Nandor and Laszlo throw their hands up and are like, "What the fuck, dude?" Colin, "Oh, it's a game called Welcome to Bloxburg, and it's a game on Roblox, and you can build your own house or get like a job like a pizza maker or a woodcutter or an insurance adjuster." And then it cuts, and I was laughing so hard. Look, I find this sort of thing like pretty interesting, actually, when a kid is telling me about a game that they like, as somebody who also likes games. I do want to hear, but they can go too long. And I know that Nandor and Laszlo don't fucking give a shit. And probably Shawn doesn't either. But he asked because he's a very polite young man. So then we go to Nadja. And she is taking a literal bloodbath. You guys, I hated this scene so much. It's not just the bloodbath itself, which is horrifying. It's the fact that Nadja is in the bath in full makeup. She's got like eye makeup and glitter on her eyes and everything. It's a full thing. And she's also, her hair is down and in the blood in such a way that it almost looks like she's clothed and her hair is just covering it. And even if she's not, her hair is getting all like coated in blood. And I mean, I understand the bloodbath as like a joke, but that's her food. It's like me being in a potato bath or something. Like, I'm trying to think of, I guess they have like milk baths, which are supposed to be good for your skin. I suppose that could be compared, but you don't get your hair wet with a milk bath. At least you're not supposed to, I don't think. it just gave me the heebie-jeebies, guys. It's so gross. So she's talking, her and the doll are both talking about how lovely it is to have the house to themselves for a change. Meanwhile, Guillermo is saying the same thing. And I was really not sure whether it was supposed to be that they both didn't know the other was in the house, or if it was like each of them is just going to basically pretend that the other isn't there. And as we go around with Guillermo, who is like prepping for his family to come, I said, I think last episode or the one before, that they had cleared all of the like vines and stuff out of the house and at least made that part of it look a little bit more. I was wrong. I think it was just like toned down so that the cast can get around on the set. But it's still very much a thing. There are still a ton of vines in different places, and they're really showing up this episode because he's like showing the house to his family. So the house is taking a little bit more of a front seat than it had been. And it's not just the vines either. Like, he's at one point in the hallway cleaning things up, and there's just literal trash all over the floor. It's a really... Look, I'm going to be real with you guys. All of the women on my father's side of the family from Colombia, or of Colombian descent, but I think all of them were actually from Colombia, were the most psychotic housekeepers you ever met in your life. I mean, truly, unbelievably thorough. The state of my house, they would be so disgusted. They would be so fucking upset over it. I would never bring them to my home when it looked like this and tell them it was my home. Never going to happen. Just never going to happen. So I was waiting, and there's just like one comment, and it's from the guy actually, whose name I don't remember. I don't remember any of his family's names, but he says something about how like there's a lot of trash. But he's the only one, and otherwise everybody is like fairly polite. And I was just like, that's the most inaccurate. This is the most unbelievable thing. We've got literal vampires. But for me, his abuela walking down the hall and not offering to clean up for him, that's what they do. That's just what they do. They aren't even trying to be like subtle about it. They will just be like, it's really dirty in here. They'll give you advice on how to clean. And then you will like get started on plating dinner, and you will turn around and they will have the fabuloso out with a rag, and they have been doing shit for 20 minutes and you just like didn't notice because they didn't want you to, really. They just, the mess bothers them, it feels like, on such a deep level that they like can't help it. It isn't even them quite passing judgment on you, although that's certainly also happening. It's like a compulsion, you know? So anyway, that was the only thing that I really kept waiting for somebody to just be like, I'm going to go ahead and tidy up a little bit more. But that doesn't happen. So when at the Pine Barrens, there's just a lot of issues with the two of them. First, we've got Laszlo out on the front porch playing his magic flute, and there's all kinds of wildlife walking towards him. We have a skunk coming. We've got a possum. There's I think a falcon or a hawk sitting there. A owl. I think a raccoon is coming. Yeah, all of these guys. And Nandor is like getting stuff out of the trunk and saying, do you want to help with the bags? And Laszlo is treating it like a genuine question. Like, did you want to help with the bags? I wasn't planning to. No. You want to help with the door? I wasn't planning to. No. I hated him in this moment. I really did. Like, in a lot of these discussions, I tend to be more on Laszlo's side because Nandor is so silly. But there were a few times during this that I was just like, Laszlo, what the fuck, dude? There's an amazing moment where Shawn is like sitting down and he's got a beer and points out the head of a deer on the wall that he killed when he was 12. And he says, first time I ever saw something die, but it wouldn't be the last. And as he says that, he sort of dissociates as he opens his beer, and just there's a real like vibe of I've seen some things. And I was like, Shawn, what the fuck? And the whole thing here is how bad he is with guns. Throughout this episode, he's like cleaning a gun or loading a gun or doing a thing, and it always just feels like he hasn't got the focus for the task at hand, which is very, very dangerous. And then he brings up this story, and I'm not going to get into it, but suffice to say, it's about his grandfather and a Polish guy and the fact that they played bowling until he got cataracts is the way it ends, which leads to this long argument between Laszlo and Nandor about whether he means that the Polish guy got cataracts or his grandfather got cataracts. And rather than ask the man who was telling the story, who is literally right there, what he meant, and he does attempt to interrupt more than once to explain the reality of what he was saying, they get into this like really petty little back and forth about like what it means. And Laszlo is like saying, I think the guy made money bowling, like that was his livelihood, which Nandor thinks is absurd. And then Laszlo asks Colin to Google it. And what Colin winds up Googling is very specific, like Polish bowling top cash earners. And because of there actually having been a person ever who bowled, who was Polish, who made money, they both treat it as if Laszlo won the argument. But that's not actually what the argument was. And that's what I really liked about the scene, to be honest, is when you are butting heads with a person in this way, the thing that you start off like pissy about, it isn't even the thing that you wind up arguing about later. The whole conversation will evolve and somebody will bring up a different point so that eventually one of you is like feeling vindicated. But, you know, the next day when you're thinking back on the conversation, you realize that like neither of you actually proved your point from the outset, the initial point that you were attempting to make, because you got so lost in the sauce with all of the other like little things that got brought up in the midst of that argument. So the fact that like they have a person right there who could just answer the question about this particular story, which was what the whole question was about, it then becomes, I don't believe any Polish person has ever made money off of bowling, which is just that's not the topic at hand at all. And I do kind of like that, despite the fact that Shawn attempts to like be like, actually, this is what I meant. The argument reaches a certain level where he realizes it's not about that anymore and just sort of sits back and lets them have a go at each other, because obviously he is not needed for this part of the conversation. And I just sort of like that self-awareness in him. I feel like that's important to have. So anyway, this is just like one of the little arguments between the two of them. Then they go out into the woods, and we find out that the Jersey Devil, at least so far as they know here, is not real. It was made up by vampires to explain all of the dead bodies that they leave in the Pine Barrens. Now, guys, you would really think that after how many times this show has brought up a fictional creature, told me that it is not real, and then it is indeed real, I would fucking know that was coming by now. I am always surprised. I don't know why I'm such a fucking dunce. But I truly, when there is an actual Jersey Devil at the end of the episode, was startled and just like, oh, we're doing that. I felt like such a fucking rube. How do I not get it by now? But yeah, the Laszlo is out with Colin and Nandor, and they're like supposed to be hunting. It's nighttime and they're, out in the Barrens. What Nandor wants to do is use echolocation, but Colin won't shut the fuck up about his game. And Nandor is getting extremely irritated about it. I was sort of surprised because, like, Laszlo, I won't say that he's exactly taking Colin's side, but all of them want to, like, hunt and eat, right? So I thought that Laszlo would at least be as frustrated with Colin as Nandor is. But it seems not. And I have to assume it's simply because it's Nandor saying the thing. He's just going to oppose it because that's just what you do. We get a moment later of Shawn walking out with Colin in the daylight, and he is going to hunt. And the shot of the Barrens is really gorgeous. It's obviously fall here, and we've got some trees starting to change. I would probably, New Jersey, I would put this probably like the very beginning of October that this was being filmed, because I feel like once you get into mid-late October, all those trees would have changed color. But Colin is talking to Shawn about how he doesn't think Laszlo really likes him very much. And Shawn says, "Are you kidding? He loves you." And Colin says, "He's always saying, I'm not going to have you grow up to be a bald-headed, energy-sucking bore." And Shawn says, "That's why my old man wouldn't let me watch PBS." Which is not, it's not even that good a line, but I don't know, that did get me. Colin says, "Do you think I'm boring?" What? You got your little computer pad and a stick and a whole bunch of other neat stuff, right? What else do you like doing? Colin says, "Well, I like to go in the basement and smash holes in the wall with a hammer. Like really hard. Just over and over again. Just smashing and smashing and smashing. I can't help it. It makes me feel good." And as he says this, Shawn changes very subtly what shoulder he's carrying his gun on to the one that's away from Colin. And says, "But only walls, right? You don't like smashing a person or something." And it just cuts. And that's it. That's it. We don't get any more of that conversation. I could have watched these two talk for like 20 full minutes. I loved the weirdness of this interaction. It's, the normality of Shawn, plus the normality mostly of Colin's interests, but then the extra edge of like Colin being what he is. It's just a really fun, weird little, like, I don't know. I just really like it. And I can't tell how much Colin truly understands what he's supposed to keep secret and not. I have to assume he gets it like fully, because otherwise he probably would have accidentally said something by now. But because none of these like conversations are really about him trying to drain Shawn, he is truly trying to just have a conversation like a little kid, I'm just fascinated by it. I think too, because Shawn is such a dodo, it feels like they're kind of on a similar level in a lot of ways, you know? So part of me is like, maybe this is somebody that Colin could be friends with and go over and like play a video game. And I could see him getting Shawn into the game that he's into at the moment. But anyway, so let's go back to Nadja. She is here, with, that's right. I forgot about it. She's got, evil Mabel and the Nandor's wife. I always forget her name. It's something with, I always want to say Magda, but that's super not it. Oh, okay. Here it is. She's singing "There's a Girl in the Village with One Very Small Foot." I love that is one of the recurring songs. It's the like Bear and the Maiden Fair of this universe for Song of Ice and Fire fans out there. She just calls her Mrs. Nandor the Relentless. Oh my God. Mrs. Nandor the Relentless. Oh, does she know her name? I think she doesn't know her name. Anyway, so she is getting along with Nadja and evil Mabel and the doll quite well. And they're really they're having such a good time. It's really, really cute. I love the camaraderie here because it's so rare to see, and a lot of these women have not really had scenes together. So it's fun to have like some positive energy where they're genuinely just shrieking with laughter. And there's a moment here where Guillermo is like making up the table for his family. And he made a really beautiful table. I just really want to like give credit where it's due here. As much as I have said I would never have them in this house with the house looking like it is, the tablescape, and I know that word is cringy, but that's what it's called, is stunning. This is like what I wouldn't have minded for my wedding. It's actually pretty close in a lot of ways to what I did have for my wedding. And he is like folding their napkins, and he bends down because he drops a napkin so that Nadja comes in and doesn't notice him, which is why I'm thinking that both of them are just not aware the other is still here, which is weird. So what Guillermo explains to his grandmother is that the cameras are here because they're making a compilation for her birthday. And says, so we're doing that now, which I think that's fine. They could throw that together, no problem. When they ask about the vines, it's eco-friendly is his explanation. And I don't know if it's his brother, his cousin, makes a joke about his Versace clothes being like not menswear. It's just a little gentle ribbing. So they come into the room. They are all stunned at the beautiful table he has made. And just generally, the vibe of the room is really nice. He's got a fire laid out and everything. And they start talking about how his job at Panera is going. And it turns out he is taking up the same story as Nandor and Laszlo about how he works at the railroad. And his cousin is asking how he got promoted from Panera Bread to the railroad. He's asking the real questions. And Guillermo is answering them in like an adequate way, to be honest. But he manages to punch holes in all of his answers. I honestly was kind of impressed by this. This dude is clearly like something is up. And I don't feel like he's purposely trying to fuck with Guillermo. But it's just a sort of sense of like, you may as well just tell me, dude, because I know that's not what you're fucking saying it is. And then we jump up to Nadja, and it turns out she loves the movie Mamma Mia. She says, it's my favorite film to watch when I am missing my homeland. But Laszlo never lets me watch it. He says, my darling, I can't watch that. It reminds me of all the bastard children I fathered when I was a human. I really enjoy her being super into Mamma Mia. I have never seen it. And the fact that she like finds out that there's a second one and is very excited about it is super cute. I just like whenever Nadja likes something that's really normal and basic. It's just nice. Miss T says Marwa. That's his wife's name. Thank you. Oh, I never get it. Marwa. But we go back to the woods, and this is when we hear the story about the Jersey Devil. And I love Shawn, he's clearly drunk, describing what it is and what it looks like. You guys, I have to read you exactly what he looks like. He's got dragon wings and a half goat horse face with a chin strap beard like an Amish, and hooves and horns, and 2 low hanging balls with a button cock on top. And Laszlo to that says, fantastic. And he creeps through the Pine Barrens looking for little kids who don't believe in him. And this is when he knocks the gun over and it just goes off. And Laszlo and Nandor have a talking heads moment where they both are laughing at the fact that Shawn, like many humans, doesn't know when some bullshit is made up. But we have then the very important moment of Shawn and Laszlo clinking beers and Nandor getting up to try and clink with him. And they're done and they don't even make an effort to like pretend to include him or anything. That was the part that got me the most, is like when somebody is right there and you just clink with each other and not the other person, that's just already like, you know, you're being rude. But then when the other person tries to jump in and you don't make an effort, like that's a purposeful snub. You know what you're doing when you do that. And I really judged like Laszlo not wanting to include Nandor is one thing, but the fact that Shawn doesn't make an effort to include Nandor, I really was like pissy with him for that. So the argument between him and Nandor that arises because of the gun, Laszlo is like, you know, spinning it on his finger in a very sort of old West film kind of way, like a spaghetti Western. And eventually the argument that they wind up in, he starts just shooting wildly at Nandor, and we will get there in a moment. But it takes a lot longer for Shawn to wake up than it should have. So this is when Nadja begins to walk past the dining room and she spots Guillermo and his family, taken completely by surprise. So what Guillermo does is first he says she's the maid, but also his girlfriend. And when he says it's like Daphne from Frasier, I think his aunt says, well, Daphne wasn't the maid. She was his father's physical therapist. I cannot get enough of very detailed knowledge of Frasier. And it's not even that detailed, but just like deciding that you're going to really be specific about what it was, and also specifically that it's like a female character and everybody wants to be like, oh, she was just a maid, but you know that's not true. So you're going to be like, actually, she was practically a medical professional, you know, like, and really put some fucking respect on Daphne Moon's name. I fucking loved this moment so much. It was such a small thing. And the fact that Guillermo even thought to be like, oh, you know, like Daphne from Frasier, I was just like, dude, what are you doing? And apparently he had told his mom at one point, because she kept trying to like hook him up with somebody from her church, I think, that he was dating Nadja, and like photoshopped his face onto Laszlo's body because they have a similar build. And I was like, actually, I could see how that would work pretty well. So he says, Nadja, why don't you join us? And everybody is sort of like, I can't believe your girlfriend was in the house the whole time and you didn't invite her. And she says, oh yeah, well, he can be a real piece of shit. And they all start giggling and like, wow, language, okay. But she's like, oh, that's my pet name for him. So this is when his abuela, who is wearing this like rainbow sweater, by the way, which I felt was significant, and it turns out it kind of is, I think. She asks for help getting to the bathroom, and he agrees to assist her. And when they go into the hall, she is immediately like, hey, so she's a vampire. And I loved the way that the music changes in this scene, and the whole vibe completely alters in a second. Everything about his acting feels a lot more real all of a sudden, and his grandmother seems truly like freaked out. And it had never occurred to me, and evidently had not occurred to Guillermo either. If he is descended from a line of vampire killers, then probably other people in his family also have the ability to suss out vampires, and maybe also like the physical dexterity and skill that he has. But yeah, it had not occurred to me. So his abuela is like, yeah, they told me that when you are around one of those creatures, your heart is filled with fire and you break out in goosebumps. And she shows him, and we see like the rest of his family are not having the like specific reaction. Apparently, I don't think that they know the symptoms the way that his grandmother does, but they are getting like upset and angry over nothing in a way they recognize it's happening, but they can't understand. And it's clearly a symptom of like being near a vampire and it agitating them for some reason. Eventually, his cousin is even like, it's really hot in here. I feel like something is wrong. And this was fascinating. I really, really liked this. So, okay, here's the fight between Laszlo and Nandor. You said I was hardly an authority. Well, exactly that. You haven't seen any action in nigh on a millennium. Probably more accurate to call you a former soldier than a real soldier, wouldn't you say? And Nandor gets very salty about this, which, personally, I think that Laszlo is correct. Like, it's been 1,000 years. You're done. You're not a soldier anymore, bro. Like, you were, and I respect it, but just come on. And this is when Nandor says something about how Laszlo never had to be a soldier because he went to a school for fancy lads. And he's like, you're referring to Eton? Wow. I told you that in confidence, and you just say that out loud? And this is when it really begins to pop off. And I really appreciate Colin Robinson in the midst of this is still playing his game, but recognizing when the two of them are starting to amp it up a little bit too much. And he says something about how Laszlo is the one who was allowed to like take care of the house while they were all gone for a year, but when they came home it was a piss-filled shit house, which I understand what he's saying and he's not wrong, but that expression is just so clumsy and awkward. And I appreciate so much all you do is lay around all day and tinkle on your piano and have sex with Nadja, to which Laszlo's like, if you mean to insult me, I don't know what to tell you because that sounds like the actual dream. So that's awesome, and I'm not sorry. Meanwhile, Colin starts to get really agitated. You can see him just like readjusting in his seat, looking up at them and trying to sort of like hide behind. I think he has an actual laptop at this point. And finally Laszlo lifts the gun, and it's in response to Nandor is getting to the heart of the matter. He brings up how Laszlo took a different seat in the car when he knew Nandor is taller and would be uncomfortable directly behind Shawn's seat. And when Laszlo explains that he wanted to be able to talk to Shawn, we're starting to really get into things. The whole like contract that they had as roommates gets brought out and argued over, and there are like sub clauses and everything, and they're talking over this. And I think Colin is in the background of this scene right up until Laszlo stands and brings out his copy of the contract. And then when the camera pans over, Colin's gone. And the two of them, Laszlo calls Nandor a jabroni, and it seems accidentally pulls the trigger. Nandor catches the bullet, and then he starts to actually dodge because Laszlo keeps shooting. But instead, he doesn't catch anymore, and he gets shot in the hand. And this is when Shawn wakes up and comes out, and they realize that, like, Colin is nowhere to be found. Where the fuck is he? So, I really enjoyed the twist that even as Guillermo's family is starting to get more and more agitated, Nadja is actually really liking them and is sort of like baffled at the fact that somebody who sucks as bad as Guillermo does has come from a family that seems so dope and cool. And this whole conversation is starting to really like fly out of control. The abuela stands up. She has broken the handle off of her chair so that it's like a point, and says something about how this like evil creature now has to die, and begins chasing her. And the rest of her family, who I don't think even like really understood what was happening until a second ago, just completely fall into ranks, and they are all breaking furniture up into stakes and chucking them at Nadja, who's doing like the climbing along the walls thing. It looks really creepy. And they are like very good with their aim. She's wondering why the fuck she has so much furniture made of wood in the house. Her friends are still out here watching the Mamma Mia movie without her and not aware at all about what's going on in the rest of the house. And Nadja starts to say, "Do you know who you're messing with?" And they all throw stakes, and she's just like, "Never mind, don't worry about it." So finally, Guillermo has to jump in front of her and tell his family, "Look, here's the thing. They are vampires. I know that they're vampires. I work for them because I would like to someday be a vampire. And Nadja is not my girlfriend because I'm gay." And immediately, like, the vampire thing is backburnered by everybody but his cousin. And his cousin, "Wait, you want to be a vampire? Not, you're gay?" It's the vampire thing that he is like, "What?" The rest of his family is like, "Dude, we know you're gay. Come on, bro. We've known that forever." And Guillermo is truly like completely taken off guard. He's like, "Wait, what?" And they say, "Yeah, of course." And they have this like really sweet group hug. That's like, I love this. Nadja is in the background hissing. But later on, he has Nadja erase their memories about her being a vampire and him wanting to be a vampire. But he has them keep the memory of him coming out to them. And I really enjoy this because, you know, all of us, I think, have thought this whole time that Guillermo was gay or bi or poly or pan or fucking anything. But we never had confirmation, and I was sort of wondering if we would just never get confirmation. I wouldn't be mad if we didn't, because like leaving it sort of up in the air is interesting, especially since we've got a lot of representation of people who are fine with all different types of sexual relationships in the show. The vampires fuck anybody, regardless of not only sex, but also basically species and stuff. But so I wasn't feeling like, well, we need to have some gay representation. Why wouldn't you have him come out? But I do like that eventually we're getting to this place where, yeah, we're going to get a little bit more specific, you know? So Laszlo and Nandor are out in the Pine Barrens looking for Colin. And this is when they finally have the confrontation or conversation. They had the confrontation already with the fucking gun. But now they're having the conversation about how Nandor says, we always used to have guy time, and now you're always clinking beers with Shawn or rehearsing songs with the baby Colin Robinson. We never hang anymore. And Laszlo says, bro, I'm not very comfortable with emotional flamboyance, as well you know. I'll be brief. My feelings aren't too dissimilar to your own. And that cracked me up, because having been reading Sense and Sensibility lately, that's like basically how people confess their love to one another. They basically like use language like that, you know, the meaning is there technically, but it just feels so inadequate. And they hear Colin, and they find him on the perch where you hide and hunt deer from. And as they find him, they hear Shawn yelling for help. And they get to the house, and he's being dragged down the front of the house by the actual Jersey Devil. He's got the weirdest like bat wings, you guys, with two arms on each side. There's like a small pair of arms that's sort of underneath. It's so weird. The design of this creature is it's very creepy. It makes me very uncomfortable. And of course, like big hanging balls as well. So Laszlo starts to do the like playing of his magical flute, which gets the devil to lower slowly to the ground. And it seems like maybe I've got this under control. But he takes the flute, and then he grabs Laszlo by the throat. And it's really looking like, ooh, it's too late. And then all of a sudden, this is so good, you guys. It's so stupid. But I did still very much enjoy it. Colin yells, "Hey Siri, play some New Jersey music." And it starts playing Living on a Prayer. And the Jersey Devil, who is holding both of them like upside down, no effort, he's much stronger than the two of them, starts to dance in place and sing to Living on a Prayer with like his hand positioned as if he's holding a microphone. And Colin very obligingly jumps to the actual like chorus of the song. And Laszlo sneaks up on him and turns back into his human form, because he had been a bat, and bites him and begins to drain him. And then Nandor bites him on the leg and begins to drain him. And in the background, Shawn says, "Hey, I found the rifle," and he pulls the trigger and shoots himself in the foot and goes down. And Colin just says, "Okay, can we go home now?" Oh my God. So there's one thing I want to say here, and I don't know if there's an answer for this or not. I thought that Guillermo couldn't be mesmerized because of the, vampire killing blood in his veins. But apparently, well, I don't know, because Nadja is able to do it to his family. And it works, apparently. So I'm not really certain why he is resistant to it when they are not. And Nadja doesn't really want to help Guillermo for just like reasons. But she's like, I did see each member of my family die and now haven't had family for hundreds of years. So I feel for him. And I also don't want to be like the subject of his mommy issues if his family all die. So we've got 2 conditions. You have got to get all the others out of the house once a month so that I can have it to myself. And I want a copy of Mamma Mia 2, Here We Go Again, which she reads off of a little paper with very, very much excitement. They were hypnotized and now the house will be safe. More importantly, I'm just glad they finally know the truth about me. Well, besides about the bit about you working at the railroad and being desperate to be a vampire. And when he says the part about telling them that I'm gay, and not just says, I mean, who isn't gay? And he says, a lot of people. Oh, okay, I'll get the trumpets out. You guys, I am straight. You know, I think everybody's like on a spectrum here, but I'm pretty straight. I can find women very hot, but beyond like the looking, I have no urge to do any more. It's just like, God damn, she fine. And that's sort of where it ends for me. But I live for how much more mainstream queerness is becoming and how many people I know who are queer are like, I can't believe there are even straight people anymore. Really? We're still doing that? Like, basically, if you're straight, it's like archaic. It's like, you've got to be trying, right? To be straight, like, get out of here, you're straight. That's not even really a thing. And in as much as I am, I also can kind of be like, no, I get it. Like, you know, I love the whole vibe here of just like, fucking everybody's gay though. Like, get out, get over it. And him, it's just a good moment. And Laszlo says, we hypnotized Shawn, but I'm worried that we fucked him. And this is coming back because I just kept thinking, like, you guys have talked about how worrisome this is. You almost killed him once already. And he's talking to Colin in the back and he says, can you make a pizza tree? I just made 10 Robux. What's the street value to that? And Laz and Nandor have brought home the head of the Jersey Devil, which they hang on the wall as their like trophy from hunting. It's very good. And then we get the, what the hell is that? And pointing at the My So-Called Life poster, which I do not really get why that's up. I don't know if there was something specific that he was hiding in that spot, but I don't remember what it was. So, but yeah, I just, that was a pretty fun episode. I did really, really enjoy this one. Miss T says, let's just let that go about the mesmerizing. Yeah, that's pretty much what I figured. Is just sort of like, okay, we'll just, what we'll say is maybe because he actually did kill vampires, that he's like officially a vampire killer now. And so certain things have activated in him that have not in his family. How about that? We'll say that he's like truly, he's of the Van Helsing line. And they are sort of like latent. Miss T says, yeah, exactly. All right. I'm going to wrap this up, but thank you guys again very much for joining me, for listening. I hope you're enjoying it. Thank you again to Max for commissioning this and Miss T for hanging out. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.